There is one fundamental idea to Buddhist practice which we must remember, and that is when we say that phenomena have no self-nature, it is another way of saying that they arise dependent on another. In other words, they are empty. And now since we have talked about emptiness, there is a very famous saying, which is emptiness of the four elements. The Buddha became enlightened and realized that everything in this world is made up of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. So earth is something that is solid. Water is something that is moisture. Fire can be represented by warmth, while wind could be represented by the flows. And why do we call them the four elements? Because everything is made of them. Therefore, they make up the elements of all things in this world. Take a cup as an example. The clay that is made of represents the earth, while the earth itself represents the water, which makes the clay. And the clay goes through the fire, and after it goes through the fire, it then has to be dried in the wind in order for it to become the cup. So from the clay to the water, to the fire, to the wind, a cup is made. Another example could be our body. Our bones, sinew, skin, and flesh are the earth, while the liquids in our body, or the fluids, such as blood and saliva, become the water. And our body temperature is the fire element, while our breath, our breathing, is the wind part of our body. And in other words, these are what makes up a human body. And if any of these falls out of balance, it will cause discomfort in the body. So that's why when we say that when these four elements fall apart, we die. And as a result, the body is a combination of the four elements, so it is not real. Once there was an old woman who was a very devoted Buddhist, and as she was illiterate, but she heard that chanting the sutras can help her accumulate a lot of merits. He found a teacher to teach her how to read the Heart Sutra. After she learned how to chant the Heart Sutra, she chanted very sincerely every day. However, one day when she came across the sentence where it says, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, and no body, she started to feel curious and confused. She touched her nose, her ear, and her eyes, and said, aren't my eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body there? So why is the Heart Sutra saying that there is no eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body? So she ran back to the teacher and asked him, what's this? The teacher said, it's the eye. And then she pointed to it, and she said, what's this? The teacher said, it's your nose. And then she pointed at this and said, what's this? The teacher said, these are your ears. Didn't I teach you all of these in the Heart Sutra? The old woman said, yes, you did teach me, but the Heart Sutra says there's no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. But how come my eye, ear, nose, tongue, body are still around? This question startled the teacher, who had been teaching for decades, but he could not answer this old woman's question. And what this story tries to tell us is that we normally think that our nose, our eye, our ears are real things. But we have never realized that they are simply a combination of causes and conditions. So they are not real in nature. And therefore, the Heart Sutra tells us that there's no eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body to demonstrate the fact that things arise because of causes and conditions. Things are obliterated because of cause and conditions. That is why we say that the four elements are empty. There was a story from the Sutra Wall of 100 Parables that told us that once a little boy was playing beside a pond. He saw gold in the pond. And he was so happy that he jumped into the pool trying to grab that gold. He got all dirty, he got all tired, he got all sweaty, and he kept groping, but he just couldn't get anything. Therefore, he got out of the pond. After he got out, he turned around. Hey, the gold is still there. He can still see it. Therefore, he jumped back in again, trying to grab it. And still, the same thing happened. No matter how hard he had tried, he just couldn't grab the gold. And the dad walked past by and asked him, "What are you doing?" The little boy says, "I'm trying to get that gold that's in the middle of the pond." And so the dad looks into the pond and realized that it was only the reflection of something on a tree. What this story tells us is that in the shadow of no self, we tend to believe that we can see the image of a self. And as a result, we tend to make useless efforts, and this will only get us nothing in the end. We've talked about impermanence in a lot of situations, and in particular to this very special Dharma seal. And of course, then this may make you wonder, what relation does impermanence has to our everyday living? And let me try to clarify this point. First of all, impermanence helps us understand this ever-changing nature of life. That life is like a kaleidoscope. It's always changing. Every moment that you look at life, becomes different. And it's because of that ever-changing nature we will learn to cherish every present moment. And impermanence would also tell us how short life is, so that we will understand the importance of pursuing the most important parts of life to make it meaningful, which are spiritual growth, as well as finding ways to know yourself better, to understand yourself better. And thirdly, for you to discover the truth of life. These are all sorts of things which impermanence can help you achieve. And of course, we would also, through the help of impermanence, learn to appreciate this world. Look at this world with a more hopeful and brightful mind, so that we will not always be fearful or disliking towards a lot of things in our lives. Instead, we will learn to be more grateful to what has been given us, as well as becoming more courageous in trying out new things. But amidst all of these changes, within this status of impermanence and change, the most important thing is for us to maintain an unchanged mind, an unmoving mind, in order for us to deal with all of these changes. Once inside a monastery, there lived a lama and a little mouse. The mouse was always scared and shaking. Therefore, the lama asked the mouse one day, "Why do you always look so scared?" The mouse said to the lama, "I'm scared because there's a cat outside. It's bigger than me, so I'm afraid of it. I'm afraid of going out." The lama then said, "There's a way that I can help you. I can turn you into a cat, so both of you be cats and you'll no longer be afraid of it." The mouse said, "Okay, let's try that." Therefore, the lama turned the little mouse into a grey cat. But the grey cat is still always scared. It's still shaking all the time. So the lama asked it again, "What are you afraid of?" The grey cat said, "I'm afraid because there is a dog outside." The lama said, "Okay, I'll turn you into a dog. So being the same as a dog, you will not be afraid anymore." They did that. But this grey dog still appears frightened and shaky all the time. So the lama asked it once again, "What are you afraid of now?" The grey dog said to the lama, "I'm afraid because there's a tiger outside." So once again, the lama turned this grey dog into a tiger, so that you should not be afraid of the tiger because it itself is one too. Nevertheless, the tiger is still always frightened and scared. So once again, the lama asked it, "What are you afraid of now?" The tiger said, "I'm afraid because there is a monster outside and it's bigger than me, therefore I'm afraid of it." And then the lama looked outside the window, and it had all along been the same animal, which is the yellow cat outside. Therefore it turned to the little mouse and said to it, "It's not those things or those animals that you are afraid of. You are actually afraid of yourself." So no matter how big or strong this mouse became, because it had always been afraid of itself, then it had never been able to overcome such fears. And what this story tries to tell us is that things may change, but if our mind remains strong and unmovable, then we will be strong enough to deal with all the problems, all the changing phenomena around us. Okay, now let us look at the third Dharma seal, which is Nirvana, or that Nirvana is ultimate peace. And the Sanskrit term for Nirvana can be extinguished or gone out, just like how the flame on a candle goes out, how the lights around you suddenly just go out. It's extinguished. We need to realize that suffering is caused by delusion as well as belief in duality. We tend to grab onto what is good and reject what is bad. We tend to cling on to what we like and reject what we dislike. And as a result of doing so, when our desires are not fulfilled, we start to suffer. And Nirvana becomes the cessation of all these delusions and duality. Therefore, in the state of Nirvana, we will no longer have belief in duality or in belief in a separate self. In other words, Nirvana means the cessation of birth and death of that self. It also means the cessation of belief in a permanent, absolute anything, anywhere. Therefore, just like how we've talked about impermanence, how the woman wanted her son to come back to life, and then realized that life cannot be eternal. This same thing goes to our self, that it is empty, that it is not eternal. And we need to realize that Nirvana is not a deluded state. When we try to come up with a description of what it is, in a way, we are already moving away from it. But since we are trying to give everybody a basic idea of what the concepts represent, we can only give you very, very simple descriptions and leave the rest up to you. Leave it up to you to experiment and experience and really, really proving what is true to life and so on. But let's go back to this delusion or this delusion in the fact that the self is eternal. And if we were to believe that there is that eternal self, and then it would only start another round of delusive reasoning. But Nirvana is the end of all of that, because it is the cessation of delusion and suffering. Of course, if we are trying really, really hard to explain or describe what Nirvana is, there are actually 4 ways to do so in Buddhism. First of all, we can look at Nirvana as original Nirvana. And it is also known as originally pure Nirvana or pure self-nature Nirvana. And this is the original or the fundamental nature of everything. And this is where the Buddha mind lies in. And this is the Buddha mind that lies in the heart of everything. And therefore, at this point, at the point of original Nirvana, there will be no difference between Buddha and an ordinary sentient being. And a second way for us to understand Nirvana is to look at Nirvana with remainder. And this is the state of an enlightened person who still has a body. Therefore, remainder means with a body. And an enlightened person creates no karma. And he is still in a body only because of his remaining karmas that are remaining from the past. And although he has become enlightened, he still has to go through the physical trial of heat, cold, old age, sickness, and death.